Hello again, and welcome to the next in our series of fireside chats. Today speaking with our preacher for the pre-recorded Eucharist for the 6th Sunday of Easter, Revd Lyndon Phillips. Welcome, Lyndon, and thank you for your ministry to us already through the liturgy. Lyndon is the priest in charge of Parish of Rosedale, which is not far from Sale, where we're recording this conversation, and she's also the regional dean of the eastern region of the Diocese of Gippsland. So Lyndon, tell us a little bit about what a regional dean is and does.
I try and keep in contact with the ministers or vicars or priests of the parishes of our region, and it's an empowering role to be able to, and an empowering role, and it's a privilege to actually see how different people operate and how their faith communities operate. And we all seem to operate very differently, and particularly in this time of COVID-19, we're all participating in worship very differently. And it's to see the strength of people within the parishes has been quite extraordinary, and the resilience of people has been quite extraordinary. But in a normal circumstance, being a regional dean is a lot of fun in catching up and having conversation and laughs and gathering and sharing of ideas, really.
So it's kind of a pastoral role, working in conjunction with the Archdeacon of the region?
Very much so, and working with Brenda is just an absolute joy. It was a joy working with Edie as well, and we're all very different people, and it's been quite different because when Brenda came into the role, we then had bushfires, and now we've got COVID-19, and so it's been really concentrated on the pastoral side more than the social side. But it really does show the resilience, brings out the resilience in people, and you can share and learn and grow from all of those experiences. And it's not just with the ministers of the parish, because they reflect their people, so you get to understand more of how their people operate as well, which is really wonderful. Yeah, it'd be nice to have more contact with the people in the Far East, I would think, but of course Brenda does a brilliant job in that area as well, and her contact with Croaging along is extraordinary. It's so supportive.
Lyndon, in your homily this morning, you spoke really helpfully about the idea of friendship, the disciples' friendship with Jesus, our friendship with God through Holy Spirit, and in the course of that you related something of your experience as a young mother in the district of Iraq near Mildura, and an experience of real isolation there, and your appreciation of a particular friendship. Of course, that was in the days before Zoom or any of the wonderful technologies, FaceTime and so on, that we can benefit from now. How would you compare that experience of isolation with the sort of isolation that people might be experiencing in the current COVID-19 restrictions and the place of technology?
Actually, I don't know that there is a lot of difference in it. Of course, we can connect with the technology, but that still doesn't bring people into our physical life. And when Harry and I moved to Sunraysia and the locality of Iraq, Iraq is we haven't been back there, was in the middle of nowhere. You went up the Sunraysia highway, turned right at Carwalk, and you just kept going until you hit the Murray River, and that was Iraq, that was where we lived. And we were on a very big dairy farm. Harry was part of the management team of the dairy farm, and the rest of the land around us was citrus at that stage and vineyards. And we had both come from Melbourne and both from Moonee Ponds. We couldn't get anything more bustling than Moonee Ponds, and here we are in Iraq. And so my sense of isolation was extraordinary, and I joined a play group in Redcliffs, but even that, you could only afford to go there once a week, and you just didn't have the transport or the funds to do anything. And so the friendships that I made at playgroup, they really grounded me. And Heather, who I spoke about,
yes.
she's a real person, and she was just wonderful. And I was able to join in then with her social of friends, which that was wonderful. So thinking back to that time in this COVID time of isolation, there's lots of people within our parish and parish area who have closeted down. They have really locked themselves down because of their vulnerability. And so we have to respect that vulnerability and yet still engage with it. Sometimes when we drop off the parish information, there's a basket outside the house so that it's dropped in, it's sprayed with Glen 20 and then brought inside. And all of that is showing the need for that respect, but also there's a real fear. But the beauty of, if there is a flip side to the COVID, is that initially I had absolutely no idea how we were going to do church, and the Rosedale Parish incorporates Gormandale and Carrigan. I haven't ever measured the kilometres, but I don't know, maybe 50 kilometres would it be? I'm not sure. Maybe
Sounds
not.
right, yeah.
Something, it would be something like that, I would think. And so there's people scattered throughout that area. Harry chauffeurs me around once a week when we drop off all our material that we use for worship, and it takes us the best part of 5 hours to do that delivery. And that's without conversation, that's with dropping into mailboxes. And so through the diocese, we'd had a couple of Zoom meetings for senior staff and something else, and so I was introduced to Zoom. Not that I've got any technical expertise at all.
You and me both.
And so thanks to Richard Connolly and to David Perryman, I had that introduction into Zoom, and some of the parishioners, and it was through phone calls because we didn't have Zoom at that time, or FaceTime or anything like that, they mentioned having a Zoom church, and I couldn't get my head around how we were going to manage that, and we have. And it has meant that sometimes Harry's gone out to someone's home and set up the settings that are required for Zoom.
Sure.
But in that, we have all the people from the congregations join in on this one service. And
I
so...
think you reported that your congregation had actually grown through the introduction of Zoom.
Zoom, we've had people from different denominations have joined in on our church services. A new person who moved into Rosedale the day of the restrictions is now a solid member of the parish, and an absolute delight in all of this. And so there is a flip side. But the flip side to that flip side is I've got no idea how we're going to revert back to church.
Yes.
I've left that to the people. Last week the congregation now meets at least 3 times a week on Zoom, once for church, and the rest of the time is catch up and chats and just to be connected with each other. And as I said, some people haven't left their homes in these 6 weeks. So it's been a real lifeline for a lot of people.
Yes.
And so we put it out there on Sunday for them to have a conversation, and we've got another chat meet up tonight, and just to see how people feel about coming back to church. Having the limited numbers, even though we're not huge at Rosedale, of course, but in the past, as with most of our churches, we're open church.
Yes.
So instinctively, I don't want to turn people away.
No, exactly.
And so I just don't know. I just don't know. This week we're going to Zoom, and all the material has gone out for that Zoom church, because everybody participates within our church. Someone will do readings or responses, or and up until very recently we had people singing, which has been wonderful, except other people didn't have good reception. And so we've now gone back to a different way of doing music. But we've had all sorts of progression in this, and we feel really quite confident in it. So I don't think there is going to be a rush. We've just had our windows replaced after the vandalism earlier last year. And so there is a sense of excitement and anticipation of getting back and celebrating within the church. But there's that balancing act of vulnerability of health. And so, I just don't know. I just don't know.
I think it's really good, Lyndon, to hear you say, I don't know. You spoke again in your homily of those kind of teachable moments, and it's really important for those of us in leadership roles to be able to say, I don't know, and to remain open and to be teachable. And I think this moment we're having this conversation on the day that the gradual easing of restrictions in Victoria takes effect, and I think it will be a time of uncertainty and perhaps anxiety around how we come together again for face-to-face activities without losing some of the benefits of the online activities, through the platforms as you've just described them to us. Yeah.
And I can see how maybe it will have to be a mixture of people who still feel uncertain about coming out when the restrictions are eased off completely. But that's going to be a conflict as well. So why should some people be able to have church at home and other people have to come to church? I just don't know. And I feel really blessed that this has worked so readily, and I feel really blessed how people have taken this on board. And so many people were as technically challenged as I was, and now we've got these Zoom accounts. And the beauty of that too has expanded even further, because these people are now connecting with family outside, whereas they felt they couldn't do the Zoom before and felt really challenged in it. And now they're speaking to their families on Zoom, face-to-face on Zoom in Queensland or Western Australia or Melbourne. And the same with us. So we've got a granddaughter in Tassie who up until now was not allowed to have screen time. But, she really was not allowed screen time. She would walk around with a little calculator and pretend it was a phone. And but because she loves her Buba and Zaidi, and she wants to go to Melbourne and tells them that she needs to go to Melbourne, this is a 3-year-old, and she can't come to Melbourne, we now have screen time, and which is beautiful, and she's so excited to be able to do Zoom with Buba and Zaidi.
Yeah. I think that's a great example of some of the things that we will embrace differently when we're able to do so again. Things that we've missed during this period, perhaps things that we've taken for granted, like friendship, like the capacity to shake hands or to be in the presence of another person, or to have contact with our family. And hopefully those simple, precious gifts of our existence will be appreciated in a whole new way as a result of this experience.
So another part of Zoom, which has been wonderful, is the sharing of gifts of the congregation. And I think I was speaking to you before that we've now got seed potatoes from Carajung being planted in Nambrock. How beautiful is that? There was a conversation about their vegetable gardens, and one study group was supposed to be study group, but it was about changing the degrees of your planting in your gardens so that your harvest came through a week or so later. And so people have gained so much information and friendships. And so we Harry and I do this swap drop-off, so someone will leave us gifts for the parish, and so then it might be a bucket of apples. We've had 2 buckets of apples on different occasions that we've had to divvy up and distribute to the congregation. And so I know beforehand that we're getting them, so I type up labels and say with love from, and the labels go on the freezer bags with the apples or whatever produce it is, and it goes in the roadside delivery. There's been some really beautiful beautiful examples of friendships through this, and the sharing and the generosity of spirit. It's been, I mean, it's awful being locked down for sure, but and it's given us time, I suspect, to reflect more on the, as you've said, the precious things that we've got, and to appreciate the preciousness and to appreciate the gifts that we've all got, because we're all so different.
Absolutely. Thank goodness.
Yes, Oh, you wouldn't want 100 for me, that's for sure.
Lyndon, you gave us a lovely little vignette of some of your earlier journey in the course of preaching for us today. Flesh that out a little bit for us and give us a sense of your spiritual journey and especially your pathway into ordained ministry.
I grew up in a very churched family, and it's interesting how we all reflect back differently on what our life comprised of. And if you were to ask my brothers, they would have no recollection of that type of life. But it was always really significant. And we grew up in a household where our paternal grandparents lived with us until I was about 9 or 10, I suppose. And very small, double-fronted weatherboard house in Moonee Ponds. 6 in my family, plus 2 grandparents, and just loved it. I've got no sad memories of that whatsoever. All the kids slept in one room, 2 sets of bunks. Brilliant. But no one played inside, everyone played outside. So I guess that was the difference in that time. But our Sundays consisted of church. That was it. It consisted of church and Sunday school. And so you'd go off to Matins, and then you'd go off to Sunday school, and then you'd go off for church, and then you'd go for evening prayer, and that was really our life. And it was fine. It was. I learned to throw frisbees during that time. My grandma was a milliner, and I had 1,000 hats, and I've got 3 left, and the rest I threw as frisbees. But it was all good fun. But my brothers wouldn't remember any of that. There were some really significant people in our lives from church, and that are still significant in my memory. And it was a place of just community, I suspect. But we were very isolated on Sundays. As I said, we went to church and Sunday school, and then we were confined to home. No one was allowed to come to our home. We weren't allowed to go in the front yard. We had to stay in the backyard. And the day was supposed to be set aside, and which it really was. On my mother's side of the family, my great-grandfather was an organ builder and a choir master. And in the course of, I can't even recall how, but anyway, we found out that the last organ he built is in Liverpool. And so we went to Liverpool a few years ago and had a look at, and the organ is still there. So church in whatever shape or form has always been part and parcel of it. I married a Jew, so that was an interesting experience in the early part. Harry's father couldn't come to our wedding, but he was outside the church when we came out, so that was really beautiful. So we tried to raise the children so they had an appreciation for both, and to see them sit down and eat giltfish and borscht was just a lovely, lovely memory, and they could slip from one to the other in the cuisine. So and all of our family have married different nationalities, not all of our family, but a lot of our family have married different nationalities. So from different countries. And so it's sort of like the United Nations, and it's beautiful. It gives you an appreciation. I really dislike the word tolerance, or tolerate. I would much prefer to use the word appreciation in all of that. So we've got within our family Chinese, Malay, Russian, Greek, Cypriot, Israeli. I don't know. You know,
Fantastic.
yeah, Welsh.
Yep.
Yeah, there's all sorts. So to have a family dinner where it's bring and share is an extraordinary thing to have. And so our kids have been really blessed that way in being able to appreciate what is out there and what is really Australia. You know, I mean, that's how Australia is comprised. And because Harry, he was born in the Netherlands, so he's of a Dutch mother and a Polish father. I forgot to put those in the mix before. And so, you know, that is Australia, and that's what I really appreciate about all of that. So the faith journey, I guess it was dormant for some time, and you've got to sort of find yourself in where you fit in the scheme of things and how your household is operating in different faith traditions and different practices. And then and our children weren't baptised, and that was a deliberate decision, and we wanted them to make that decision. And Holly asked to be baptised, our youngest, and all our children attended Catholic schools, and she was at St Thomas's at the time, and she asked St Thomas's Sale. She asked if she'd be baptised, and I said, well, you don't come from a Catholic background, and of course she knew that she didn't come from a Catholic background. So we came back to St Paul's, and she just said as soon as she walked in the doors of St Paul's, she was at home, which was a really interesting comment for a youngster to make. At the time, Ron Gigi was here, and I had spoken with him and said, this isn't to be a party for a party's sake. This has to be heartfelt, and this is a decision that she's going to make that is lifelong. And so he grilled her. He really grilled her, and she had several sessions with him, beautifully, you know, very gently, but so that she knew that it wasn't a flippant thing to do. And so we had a beautiful celebration of her baptism, and then Harry became a Christian. He was baptised and confirmed, and it just sort of, well, it was just part of a journey, really.
Yes.
Then Trinity, and I don't know how, it is just the Holy Spirit, that's all it is. Trinity were offering an online ministry course for the first time. Don't even know how I came to find that out. Maybe it was in the Anglican, not sure. And so I started online study in the first intake of their students, and just loved it. I can't say I was very good at it, but I just loved it. And I hadn't studied for 1,000 years. And Charles Sherlock was my first lecturer, and I just became, enamored with Charles.
Charles is wonderful. I was on the faculty at Trinity at that stage when we were getting that online program up for the first time, and Charles was a wonderful colleague, and we were all learning as we went in terms of online delivery. So it wasn't just you who were chasing your tail with the study, it was us too who were trying to get our heads around the platform.
And it really just went from there. And when I received the diploma, and it was a diploma, I think it was a diploma from ministry, would it have been? And the letter came, maybe that was somewhere else. You're going to have to edit this. There was a letter from Charles, and he had handwritten down the bottom of it, well done, Lyndon. Yeah. And I thought that he'd written that on everyone's letter. And when I saw him, wherever I saw him, I said, thank you, that was beautiful. And he said, no, you deserve that, And I said, didn't you do it for him? He said, no, that was for you. Yeah. I went, oh, yes! And he really gave me the confidence to continue on. I mean, there were beautiful people in our diocese too, but Charles is such an encourager.
Yes, he is.
And we went to Peter's Church one day before, it was the first time that I had seen Charles face to face, and Holly, our daughter, was with us, and he was just so beautiful, and beautiful with Holly, with come and look at my library, you can borrow whatever you like from my library, just beautiful man. So he was really encouraging there. And then it was thought that I should consider further. I wasn't thinking of ministry at that stage, not ordained ministry. I was quite happy lay ministry. That's well, I thought that was my role, was lay ministry. I don't have an issue. I mean, I'm an introvert. I would much prefer to be locked away, but I know that's not what we're meant to do. But
As
I love,
you said in your sermon,
I love walking alongside people because we learn so much from each other, and if we're open, like genuinely open, we just grow, we just blossom. So, and that's everybody, it's just not, the few. So, I've always worked, and I thought my work was my pastoral work, and so I'd always cared for people in the workplace and wherever else, and that's where I assumed I was meant to go. But Brian Turner had a different idea of that, and also Alan Huggins, and I didn't know Alan, and I had come here for a service one evening. I've got a feeling that it was Peter Wallace's final service here, and I didn't know Alan. I hadn't come across Alan. I'd probably seen him in procession, but I hadn't ever had anything to do with Alan. And he came up and said, "I think you need to have a conversation with me." And named me, and I'm, oh my gosh, so I did, and he felt that he saw gifts in me that needed to be explored, and so it was suggested that I go to Trinity or UFT to study. In part of my hang-ups, I suppose, I have to do a reconnaissance so that on the day I'm not caught short and not knowing where I'm meant to be. So generally I'm everywhere early, and I've been there the day before as well, so that I know where I'm going. And that's what I did when I went down. I had a meeting at the Old Warden's Lodge.
Yes.
I didn't know what the Old Warden's Lodge was. I didn't know where the Old Warden's Lodge was. And so I went down to Melbourne the day before, and this is Holy Spirit as well. Outside the chapel, next door to Old Warden's Lodge, is the valedictory group of people standing on the steps. And who do you think is standing on the steps but our Brenda Burney? And I looked through the hedge, and there is Brenda standing on the steps, and I think, oh my gosh, hello. And so she helloed back and wondered what on earth I was doing out on Royal Parade, I suppose, But I knew where I was to go the following day for the interview. And
Lovely connection.
Yes, So there's been several people, and everybody's just been really generous with me. And I see myself as different. I don't see myself as, I don't know, run-of-the-mill, and I've got a warped sense of humour. Some people say I don't have a sense of humour, but I think I do have a sense of humour.
They don't know you very well, Lyndon.
No. So, I am different. I don't really worry about what people think, because that is just what they think.
Good for you. Well, Lyndon, what a lovely account of your pilgrimage and your pathway into ordained ministry, for which we give great thanks. And we thank you for coming home to St Paul's Sale to worship with us today, and for breaking open the Word for us. You are a wonderfully relational introvert, and we're really grateful for the profound pastoral ministry that you exercise in your own parish, but across the eastern region and the diocese more generally. So God bless you in your ministry, Lyndon, and thanks again for being with us today.
Thank you.